The folder was already open on my lap when my son finally said what he'd been working up to all evening. "Mom, we need you to retire. We can't keep doing this with the daycare costs." I looked at him across the dining room table. The one I'd helped them pick out at Pottery Barn, the one that seated 8 even though it was just the 3 of us that night. And I said, very quietly, "How much are you spending on daycare?" he said. $1,900 a month. I nodded. I didn't say anything yet. I just turned a page. I should back up. I'm 66 years old. I've worked in hospital administration for 31 years. I manage a department of 42 people. I run 2 budgets simultaneously, and I have not missed a performance review in over a decade. I am not a woman who loses track of numbers. My son, I'll call him my son because that's what he is to me, the boy I raised alone after his father left when he was 9, is 34. He works in commercial real estate. His wife, who I will call my daughter-in-law because I have always tried to be fair, is 31. She works in marketing. Together, they earn somewhere around $290,000 a year. They have 1 child. A little girl 22 months old with her father's eyes and, apparently, her parents' gift for expensive tastes. 18 months ago, they bought a house in a suburb 40 minutes north of me. A beautiful house. 4 bedrooms, a 3-car garage, a backyard with a new deck they added 6 months after moving in. The deck alone was $38,000. I know because I co-signed the mortgage. Not the deck, just the mortgage. Though sometimes, those 2 things feel connected in ways I can't quite articulate. The reason I co-signed is a longer story than I have patience for right now, but the short version is this. Their debt-to-income ratio was just over the threshold the lender needed, and my daughter-in-law's mother. I'll call her the other grandmother, because she has a name but this isn't her story, suggested that I step in. She framed it as an act of love. She said, "It's just paperwork. It's just your name on a line." I should have known then. My name on a line is never just my name on a line. But I signed. Because he's my son, and the little girl was only 4 months old, and they seemed genuinely stretched. And I actually believed, that the situation would stabilize once they found their footing. That was 18 months ago. In the time since, they have leased 2 new vehicles, 1 SUV, 1 crossover. Combined monthly payment, $1,460. Joined a country club. Monthly dues, $850. Enrolled my granddaughter in a Montessori program 2 mornings a week. Tuition, $480 a month. Hired a cleaning service for the house, bi-weekly. $240 each visit. I know all of this because my son told me, piece by piece, over the course of various Sunday phone calls, where he would mention something in passing, and I would write it down in the small notebook I keep by the kitchen phone. Old habit. 31 years in administration. You write things down. The cleaning service I found out about from my daughter-in-law actually at Thanksgiving. She mentioned it the way people mention things they feel slightly guilty about. Too casually, right in the middle of something else, hoping it won't land. It landed. I wrote it down when I got home. The dinner had been my daughter-in-law's idea. She called me on a Tuesday and said they wanted to have me over, that they had something they wanted to talk through as a family. She used the word family twice in one sentence. I've noticed that people use that word most often when they want something. I said I'd come on Saturday. I spent the week before that dinner doing what I always do when something feels off. I sat down with everything I knew, and I made it make sense on paper. I pulled up my own finances first, my salary, my retirement projections, my mortgage, my savings. Then I went back through the notes I'd been keeping about theirs. By Thursday evening, I had a clear picture. They were not struggling because daycare cost $1,900 a month. They were struggling because they had built a life that cost somewhere between $12,000 and $14,000 a month to maintain on a take-home income, after taxes, after his 401k contribution, after her HSA, of roughly $16,000. That left them, on a good month, with $2,000 of breathing room. On a month with a car repair or a vet bill, or a spontaneous trip to Charleston that my daughter-in-law had posted about in October, they had nothing. The daycare was not the problem. The daycare was the line item they had chosen to point at. I printed everything out. I put it in a folder, dark blue, one I'd had since my last job, and I put the folder in my bag. I drove 40 minutes north on Saturday, and I brought the math with me. My granddaughter was already in bed by the time I arrived. That was fine. I wasn't there to see my granddaughter exactly, though I would have stayed an hour longer if she'd still been up. My son met me at the door. He looked tired in the specific way that people look tired when they've been rehearsing something. "Mom." He hugged me. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said. The house smelled like a candle. One of the expensive ones. The kind that costs $40 and makes your whole living room smell like a forest that doesn't exist. My daughter-in-law had a collection of them on the console table by the door. She came out of the kitchen, holding a dish towel, and smiled at me. "We made a real dinner," she said. "Pot roast." "That sounds wonderful," I said, and I meant it. Whatever was coming, I wasn't going to refuse pot roast. We sat down. It was a good meal, actually. My daughter-in-law is a capable cook when she applies herself, and for the first 20 minutes or so we talked about ordinary things. The neighborhood, my granddaughter's new words, a show they'd both been watching. I let it go on. I wasn't in a hurry. It was my son who couldn't hold it any longer. He set his fork down halfway through his second helping and said, "Mom, we wanted to talk to you about something." "Okay," I said. "It's about the daycare situation." "Okay," I said again. My daughter-in-law put her hand on the table, not quite touching his arm. A small gesture of solidarity, or maybe steadiness. "We've been really struggling with the costs," he said. $1,900 a month just for daycare, and then the Montessori 2 mornings a week on top of that. It's just a lot, and we've been thinking about what makes sense long-term. For the family." There was that word again. "We think," he said, and he glanced at his wife, and she gave him a small nod. "We think it would make more sense for you to retire. Or even just go part-time, and then you could be with her during the day. She loves you, Mom. She lights up when she sees you. And it would solve the daycare problem completely." I looked at him. I looked at him for long enough that he started to shift in his chair. "I'm 66, I said. "Right, exactly," he said, like that was the point he'd been making. "I'm 66, I said again, "and I've been in my field for 31 years, and I currently manage a department of 42 people and 2 operational budgets, and you're asking me to retire so that I can provide free childcare." "It wouldn't be free," my daughter-in-law said quickly. "You'd be spending time with your granddaughter." "Yes," I said. "I would." There was a pause. "How much are you paying the other grandmother?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "For childcare, the days she watches the baby." "How much are you paying her?" The color that moved across my daughter-in-law's face was answer enough. It started at her collarbone and worked its way up. We help her out sometimes," she said. "It's not like a formal arrangement." "What does helping her out look like?" I asked. "Ballpark." My son was looking at the table. "She helps with her rent," my daughter-in-law said, finally. "It's just, her situation is different. She's not working. How much?" I asked. She said a number. $1,100 a month. I nodded. I reached down to my bag on the floor, and I took out the blue folder. "That's interesting," I said, "because from what I could piece together, she watches the baby 1 full day a week, maybe 2. And you pay her $1,100 a month for that." "She's family," my daughter-in-law said. "So am I said. I opened the folder. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when people realize they are not in the conversation they thought they were in. I had been in that silence before, on the other side of it. I had sat across from administrators who thought they were managing me and found out, too late, that I had already done the math. That silence settled over the dinner table like weather. "What is that?" my son asked. "It's a spreadsheet," I said. "Well, several of them." I turned the first page toward him. It was their income, itemized, his base salary, his commission average over the last 2 years, her salary, her annual bonus. I had used the most conservative numbers I could find because I wanted to be fair. "Mom," he started. "Let me finish," I said, not unkindly. I walked them through it, the 2 vehicle leases, the country club dues, the Montessori, the cleaning service, the mortgage, the utilities, which I'd estimated conservatively. The grocery spending, which I'd estimated based on what I knew about their habits and the neighborhood they lived in. The 3 credit cards, the balances of which my son had mentioned to me. In pieces over the last year, always in the context of something else. By the time I got to the bottom of the second page, my daughter-in-law had put down her fork. The daycare cost, I said, is $1,900 a month. That is roughly 13% of your take-home income. That is not what is making this month tight. You don't know everything about our finances, she said. I know what you've told me, I said. Over the last 18 months. Which is quite a lot. She looked at my son. He was looking at the folder. Here is what I want you to understand, I said. I love that little girl. I would do anything for her that I could actually do. But retiring right now would cost me, conservatively, $400,000 in income, pension accumulation, and benefits over the next 4 years. I've run that number 3 different ways. And that's before we get to what happens to the refinancing. My son looked up. The refinancing, I said. The one you mentioned in September. The line of credit that resets in March. You'll need to refinance to avoid the payment jump. And I'm still on the mortgage. He hadn't thought I remembered September. If I retire, I said, I lose the income that qualified me to co-sign in the first place. The refinancing doesn't go through without my employment verification, which means the line of credit resets at the higher rate, and you absorb the difference. I said this clearly. I said it without anger, because I wasn't angry. I was something else, something more like exhausted and more like decided. I didn't come here tonight to win an argument, I said. I came here because this is my family, and I would rather have this conversation now than have it later when it's worse. My daughter-in-law said, So you're saying no? I'm saying, I said, that the answer to your daycare problem is not my retirement. The answer is in these pages. I tapped the folder. 2 vehicles, I said. You need one. The country club, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your own money, but I'll point out that the annual dues would cover 8 months of daycare. The cleaning service. I understand you're both working, but that's another $500 and something a month. We're tired, she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word. We're just tired. And I heard her when she said it. I heard it the way I heard my own voice at 31, when I was working full-time and raising my son alone, and the floor was always just a little closer than I wanted it to be. I heard it. I know, I said. Being tired is real. I'm not dismissing that. But I did not put the folder away. The drive home was 40 minutes in the dark. I had the radio off. I just drove. I thought about the first night I brought my son home from the hospital. He weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces. He had a red face and a habit of startling himself awake with his own hands, and I sat on the edge of the bed at 2 in the morning in our apartment that cost $420 a month, and I thought, everything I do from here is for him. I still believe that. I just believe it differently now. Doing everything for him when he was 9 months old meant getting up at 2 in the morning. When he was 9 years old, it meant working extra hours so he could go to the soccer camp he wanted. When he was 19, it meant sitting with him in the waiting room of a financial aid office for 3 hours and not complaining once. At 66, doing everything for him means not letting him build a life on a foundation that will crack. It means being the person in the room who already did the math and isn't afraid of it. It means the blue folder. He called me the next morning. Early, before 8, which told me he hadn't slept well. Mom, he said, and then he was quiet for a second. I'm here, I said. I didn't know, he said, about the refinancing. I didn't think about what your income meant for that. I know, I said. She's upset, he said, meaning his wife. I know that too, I said. She feels like you were trying to humiliate her. I thought about that. I let it sit. I wasn't, I said. I was trying to show you the whole picture. Because the picture I was being shown, that the problem was daycare, that the solution was my retirement, that wasn't the whole picture. He was quiet again for a long time. The SUV is in her name, he said. Okay, I said. I've been thinking about trading it in, getting something used. I actually found a listing last week and then just didn't do anything with it. What stopped you? I asked. He let out a breath. I didn't want to be the person who couldn't afford the car. And there it was. That's what 31 years of administration teaches you. Wait long enough, ask the right question at the right moment, and people tell you the true thing. Baby, I said, because he is still my son, you can't afford the car. That's why you're in this spot. He laughed. It was a short, tired, real laugh. Yeah, he said. I know. We talked for another 30 minutes, not about the spreadsheet, not about the mortgage, not about any of the numbers. We just talked. He told me he'd been feeling underwater for over a year and didn't know how to say it. I told him I'd noticed, which is why I'd been keeping the notebook. You kept a notebook, he said. I keep a notebook about everything, I said. That's kind of terrifying, he said. It's administration, I said. The other grandmother called me 4 days later. I had been expecting this, in the way you expect weather when the air pressure drops. She was pleasant on the phone. She's always pleasant, warm, even, in a way that slides past things. She said she understood I'd had a difficult dinner with the kids and that she just wanted to reach out, mother to mother, to see how things were. Things are fine, I said. They're just under so much pressure, she said. I know, I said. I wonder sometimes, she said, with the careful phrasing of someone who has practiced this sentence, if we could coordinate more. Between the two of us, share the load a little more evenly. I understood what she was asking. She was asking if I would take on days so she could take on fewer. I said, I think the most helpful thing at this point is for them to look at their monthly expenses. The childcare question will answer itself once the rest of the budget is in order. She paused. Right, she said. I'll always make time to see my granddaughter, I said. That's not in question. But it won't be as employment. There was a longer pause. Of course, she said. She was still pleasant when we hung up. But I noticed she didn't mention coordinating again. 3 weeks later, my son texted me a photo. It was a listing for a 2021 Honda CR-V. Clean Carfax, one owner, 41,000 miles. The price was listed at $22,800. The text underneath just said, "What do you think?" I texted back, "Solid choice. Check the maintenance records." He sent a thumbs up. 2 days later, he texted again. "We're going to look at it Saturday," I said. "Good," he said. "Also, we canceled the club membership." I held my phone for a moment. I texted, "How do you feel about that?" he said. Honestly relieved. We never even went that much. I put my phone down on the kitchen counter, and I stood there for a minute in my kitchen. In the house I've lived in for 22 years, the house where I raised him alone, the house with the same linoleum in the bathroom that I keep meaning to replace, and the garden out back that gets too much shade, I felt something I don't have a precise word for. Not pride, exactly, not relief. Something more like recognition, like watching a person find the shape of themselves again after a period of being lost. My granddaughter is at my house every other Thursday now. My daughter-in-law drops her off at 8:30 on her way to a meeting she has at 9 and picks her up at 3. It's not retirement. It's not free labor. It's a grandmother and a little girl spending a Thursday together, which is something entirely different. We do the same things every time. We look at birds through the kitchen window. There's a fat cardinal that comes to the feeder I set up in November, and she points at it and says something that might be the word red and might be her own word for something else entirely. We do puzzles on the living room floor, the big piece ones that she can manage with her small hands. We eat lunch at the little table I set up in the corner of the kitchen, the one I found at a yard sale for $12. She doesn't need the country club. She doesn't need the Montessori 2 mornings a week, though she'll probably go back when the budget allows. She needs someone to sit on the floor with her and put the puzzle pieces in the right place and say, "There it is," when she gets one right. I can do that. I have always been able to do that. The difference is that now I am doing it because I chose it, on a Thursday, at a time I agreed to, in a way that fits inside the life I have actually built, not the one someone else needed me to dismantle. The blue folder is still in my bag. I don't think about it every day. But I know it's there. There is something about being a woman who has spent 31 years doing the math that other people don't want to do. The woman in the room with the numbers that never fully leaves you. You carry it the way you carry certain other things, quietly, in a bag you bring with you, just in case. I brought the math. They set the table. That night, those two things were not compatible. But we are working on it. That, I have found, is what family actually means.